Speaking of American support to Pakistan, it is most evident at the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. A lot of people call the IMF a lender of last resort, but in Pakistan's case, it is the only resort. The IMF has bailed out Pakistan a record 24 times. The latest bailout was last week after they carried out the Pahalgam attack, and in the middle of Operation Sindoor. As you would expect, Indians are not happy about this. And it's understandable why. Pakistan is a sponsor of terrorism. The IMF is a sponsor of Pakistan. So what does that make the IMF? Also a sponsor of terrorism. Some officials at the fund appear to finally understand this. On the 7th of May, they prepared a report for the IMF board. Let me quote parts of it. This is what the IMF's report said. Reputational risks could come from any perceived lack of even-handedness or if there was a perceived misuse of fund disbursements. So the IMF staff warned of it. They feared a perceived misuse of bailout funds by Pakistan. Yet the political leadership at IMF did not care. They decided to approve the latest bailout for Islamabad. But could the IMF be having second thoughts now? They cannot reject the loan now. Instead, they're tightening the conditions for the loan. A total of 11 conditions have been listed. For example, reforming taxes on agriculture, phasing out subsidies for industries, hiking electricity and gas rates. Such measures are called the bitter pill. They will hurt ordinary people and consumers, but they will bring more money into the Pakistani treasury. You have to feel for the people of Pakistan. Living in Pakistan is already a bitter pill. On top of that, the IMF is prescribing more treatment. The question is, why these tighter conditions? Is the IMF feeling remorse? Or are they just fed up with Pakistan? Ideally, it should be both. No responsible country or agency should be standing with Pakistan, especially not a funding agency like the IMF. India's defense minister made that clear last week.
इंटरनेशनल मॉनेटरी फंड से आने वाले $1 बिलियन के बड़े हिस्से को टेरर इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर को फंड करने में इस्तेमाल होगा, ऐसा मेरा मानना है। क्या यह इंटरनेशनल मॉनेटरी फंड IMF द्वारा, जो कि एक इंटरनेशनल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है, उसके द्वारा इनडायरेक्ट फंडिंग इसे नहीं माना जाएगा? मैं दुनिया के लोगों के सामने यह सवाल रखना चाहता हूं।
Unfortunately, this is nothing new. The IMF has been a tool of Western domination. In fact, both the IMF and the World Bank. And here's the biggest proof of it. The IMF is always headed by a European citizen. The World Bank is always headed by an American citizen. Yet these are supposed to be global groups. But if you look at their policies, one thing is quite clear. They don't benefit the world. They benefit the West. I've got some examples for you. In 2023, the IMF approved a bailout for Ukraine. They gave around $15 billion in the middle of a war to Ukraine. It was unprecedented. The IMF had to amend its laws to approve this loan. Another example is Argentina. They're called a serial offender by economists, Argentina. The IMF has bailed out Argentina 23 times. This country is also the IMF's largest debtor. Yet, the International Monetary Fund approved another bailout this year. It's worth around $20 billion. And fun fact, it was approved after a pro-US, anti-China president took over the country. A third example is Egypt. The regime has been accused of gross rights violations, yet it got a bailout in 2016 and then again in 2024. Do you know why? Because the West likes the Egyptian regime. They feel it's a bulwark against Islamic radicalism. And finally, you have Greece. The International Monetary Fund gave them a $145 billion loan in 2010, $145 billion. Again, the fund had to modify its rules for this bailout. Greece did not meet the criteria for this kind of loans. But the IMF went ahead anyway. Do you know why? Because Western banks had major exposure. If Greece collapsed, those banks would also feel the heat. And this trend is visible in other places too, like Argentina's previous bailouts in 2001 and 2018. American banks had a lot of the country's debt, so on cue, the bailout came. The truth is, the IMF works, like I said, for Western interests, for American interests. They want to prop up the regimes in Egypt and Ukraine. Hence, these countries get the bailouts. They want to protect American banks in Argentina and Greece. Hence, they got bailouts. And it's the same with Pakistan. Washington wants to prop up the regime in Islamabad. That is the only reason they keep getting loans. It's the classic definition of a broken system. Only a handful of countries like India have truly benefited from IMF bailouts. But they did so despite the system, not because of it. If the IMF is serious about its mission, it should help countries that need money, not terror sponsors and puppet regimes. At Firstpost, we are choosing to hold on to accuracy. That means we won't always be first. We may not get you your breaking alert. But what you will get is what we owe you. And that is the truth. Verified, checked, and cross-checked. We rely on sources and verified ones. After all, that's what separates a journalist from a loudspeaker. But sometimes even we miss a beat. And when we do, we will tell you. Like yesterday, we ran visuals from a registered news agency. That visual turned out to be fake. So we are taking accountability. And from now on, we will cite the source of every visual, every picture, every video that you see on Firstpost will have a source mentioned. That is our commitment to you. We will wait, we will verify, we will ask again, and only then will we tell you. No noise, no panic, just the facts. Because right now, that is what the country needs most.